Inside the Village.
You're a professor of strategic management at the DeGroote School of Business. Obviously, you're following closely what's going on in the United States with the tariffs and all the changing rhetoric around that and the changing by the hour. Mark Carney said something very powerful yesterday, the Prime Minister, at his press conference. I'm just looking at it on my phone. He said, "It's clear that the United States is no longer a reliable partner. It is possible that with comprehensive negotiations, we'll be able to restore some trust, but there will be no turning back." I'm sure you saw that yesterday. Very powerful statement. What do you make of that?
Given the dynamics of who is in power in the U.S. and that what we've seen in the first Donald Trump term is that playing nice gets you absolutely nowhere with that administration. From a strategic standpoint, I think regardless of who is the Canadian Prime Minister, it would be foolish to assume that Trump is going to go away in 4 years, that this new American posture towards the rest of the world is going to go away in 4 years. From a strategy standpoint, to wait around for 4 years would be way more detrimental than ripping the Band-Aid off, even if it means, pain in the short term. To reorient Canada towards not the world as we would like it to be or as it might have been in the past, but to really meet the world for what it is right now. So I think from a perspective of managing the message and of sending the signal that needs to be sent, I believe that he struck the right tone with Canadians. It's very sad. I lived in the U.S. for a number of years. Many of my best friends and colleagues are Americans, but you can't be held at gunpoint for 4 years and then hope that things are going to magically get better at the end of those 4 years. And so I think with anything, what we teach in our MBA programs, what we teach undergrads in business schools is like, you don't escalate a failing course of action, right? You don't invest more into that. I think we've been provided enough evidence now from this administration that this is not heading in a direction that is going to be mutually beneficial or serve Canadian interests. And so at that point, it's time to exit, essentially, and to pivot and to articulate a new plan.
Speaking of that plan, from where you're sitting, say 3-4 years from now, what is the best case scenario for Canada, for the economy, and what's the worst case scenario?
I mean, well, okay, if we assume that a military invasion is completely off the table, because I think that's the absolute worst case scenario.
We hopefully assume that, yes.
So strictly economically speaking, I think that an achievable but best case scenario for the Canadian economy, and maybe this is more of a 10-year timeline, is reducing our exports to the U.S. from, we're close to 70, 80% now, getting it down to 50, and diversifying that with the rest of the world. So I think that would be the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, I think, would be like not having an honest look at where our economy is really heading if the North American integration completely breaks down. And what I mean by that is as follows. Having a wholly owned Canadian auto industry sounds great. It sounds like a great short-term idea to save automotive jobs and to repurpose auto plants in Ontario. But is that the best economic decision? I think we need to have a long, hard look about if our economy is not going to be integrated in the U.S., then to what extent do we maintain legacy industries that were built on integration with the U.S. versus to what extent do we go in our own direction, right? And so I think having an honest look at, to what extent do we maintain certain pillars of our economy because they have sort of legacy or historical significance versus what makes sense economically moving forward.
You mean like the auto industry, for example?
That would be one example. You know, is it possible to have is it realistic and possible to have a Canadian only auto industry? I think we need to think that through. I hope it is. Certainly would seem like we have the raw materials at a low enough cost and the skilled labor to do that. But you know, we have to be able to export those cars somewhere. And if we're not exporting them to the U.S., then are some of the other global markets with their own domestic auto industries interested in importing our cars? So these are really complicated questions, but I think taking a clear-headed, honest perspective of what, you know, again, what pragmatically does a more self-sufficient Canadian economy have to look like versus what would we ideally want it to look like, but that may not be, you know, feasible and pragmatic.